Margaret Davis was a 54-year-old nurse who had lived most of her life in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was respected in the hospital where she worked, known for her strict discipline, her sharp tongue, and her habit of staying late on shifts to cover for younger nurses. But behind her strong character, Margaret was weak when it came to love. For almost 2 years, she had been dating James Turner, a 50-year-old construction worker who lived part-time in Charlotte and part-time in Atlanta. James was smooth, tall, and had the kind of voice that could make a woman feel safe. Margaret believed she had finally found someone who would stay with her in her older years. She ignored the warnings from her friends that James was too restless and too friendly with young women. She wanted to believe in him. Her faith in James was shaken one Sunday evening. Margaret was scrolling through her phone when she received a message from one of her coworkers. It was a screenshot from social media. The picture showed James at a nightclub in Atlanta, holding a young woman close to him. The woman was later identified as 23-year-old Keisha Moore, a college student who had recently dropped out and was known for posting flashy photos online. The caption under the photo read, "My man, my world." Margaret froze. Her chest felt tight. The man she had given her time, her money, and her heart to was parading around with a girl 30 years younger than her. The betrayal made her blood boil. For 2 nights, Margaret couldn't sleep. She replayed the image in her mind. Her coworkers noticed her red eyes and her silence at work. At home, she sat in the dark, staring at James's old messages where he promised her loyalty. She felt humiliated, like her whole life was being mocked by a young stranger. By the 3rd day, Margaret made a decision. She would not sit and let a 23-year-old girl take her man. She would go to Atlanta, face this girl, and make James choose once and for all. She packed a small suitcase, told her supervisor she needed a few days off for family matters, and bought a bus ticket. The trip took almost 6 hours. Margaret sat by the window, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Her mind raced with images of confrontation. She imagined Keisha laughing at her, calling her old, calling her desperate. She imagined James standing there, torn between them. She promised herself she would not cry in front of them. She was a woman, a nurse, someone who had saved lives. She deserved respect. When she arrived in Atlanta, she checked into a small motel near the downtown area. That night, she called James, demanding he meet her. His voice on the phone was tense, but he agreed. He promised to bring Keisha so everything could be settled once and for all. Margaret didn't know it, but she was stepping into a dangerous game. Keisha was not just a young woman chasing love. She was fiery, impulsive, and protective of what she thought was hers. And James, instead of calming things down, seemed almost entertained by the chaos he had created. The stage was set. The older nurse against the young lover. 2 women about to clash over a man who wasn't worth half the trouble. But neither of them knew how dark the night in Atlanta would become, or that only one would leave alive. The evening air in Atlanta was thick and heavy. Streetlights glowed along the cracked sidewalks, and the sounds of traffic echoed through the city. Margaret sat in her motel room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She had put on her best dress, a navy blue gown she often wore to Sunday service, and applied makeup to cover the tired lines on her face. She wanted to look strong, not broken. At around 8:30 p.m., James called and told her to meet him at a small bar near Auburn Avenue. Margaret took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and walked out. Each step felt heavier than the last. She told herself this was her chance to claim back her dignity. But deep down, she also feared what the night would bring. When she entered the bar, her eyes immediately found James sitting in a booth near the back. Next to him sat Keisha. The young woman had long braids, hoop earrings, and a short red dress that left little to the imagination. Her smile was mocking, as if she already knew Margaret had come to beg. Margaret walked straight toward them. The room grew quieter as nearby customers sensed the tension. She stood before the table, her hands trembling but her voice firm. "James, we need to talk," Margaret said. James sighed, leaning back in his seat like a man caught between 2 storms. "That's why we're here. Let's settle this." But Keisha smirked and leaned forward. "There's nothing to settle, old lady. James is mine now. Maybe you didn't give him what he needed, but I do." Margaret's heart pounded. Her face grew hot. "You're young enough to be his daughter. You think this is love? This is lust, child. He's been lying to you the same way he lied to me." Keisha laughed loudly, drawing attention from the other tables. Please. He doesn't want some tired nurse with wrinkles and gray hair. He wants me. Look at you. Coming all the way here to fight for a man who clearly doesn't want you. Pathetic. The words cut deep. Margaret's hand twitched as if she wanted to slap Keisha, but she held herself back. Instead, she turned to James, her eyes wet with rage. Tell her the truth. Tell her you've been with me all this time. James rubbed his forehead, avoiding both women's eyes. Look, Margaret, I care about you, but things have changed. Keisha makes me feel alive again. It was the final blow. Margaret felt her chest tighten as though her heart was tearing itself apart. She leaned on the table, trembling, her voice breaking. After everything I've done for you. After everything I gave up for you. Keisha rolled her eyes. Move on, Grandma. He's mine now. The bar's atmosphere grew heavy. A few people whispered, some even pulled out phones, ready to record the drama. Margaret stood there, humiliated, tears burning her cheeks. She finally snapped. She pointed at Keisha, her voice rising above the noise. You don't know who you're dealing with. You think you've won, but I won't let you take him from me. Not like this. Keisha stood up, facing her directly, their faces inches apart. Try me. The two women were quickly separated by James and a bartender who rushed over. The bartender warned them to take their fight outside before the police were called. Margaret stormed out into the night, her anger boiling, her heart heavy with betrayal. James followed for a moment, trying to calm her, but she shoved him away. Keisha stayed behind, sipping her drink with a proud grin. Margaret returned to her motel room, shaking with fury. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't think of anything but Keisha's mocking face and James's cowardly silence. By dawn, Margaret's rage had turned into something darker. She wasn't just hurt anymore. She wanted revenge. And by the next night, Atlanta would witness a crime so brutal it would shock the city. Margaret would be found dead, her heart ripped from her chest. The next day was hot, the kind of heat that made tempers short and streets restless. Margaret hardly ate or slept. She paced her motel room, replaying every word Keisha had thrown at her the night before. Her pride was broken, her love destroyed. She thought about leaving, going back to Charlotte. But the humiliation burned too deeply. She wanted Keisha to feel the same pain, if not worse. That evening, Margaret called James again. Her voice was steady, almost calm. She told him she wanted to talk one last time. James hesitated but eventually agreed to meet her at a quiet park not far from Keisha's apartment. What Margaret didn't say was that she planned to confront Keisha there too. Around 9 p.m., the three of them arrived. James stood between the two women, trying to control the rising storm. Keisha wore tight jeans and a crop top, looking confident, almost playful, while Margaret's face carried only anger and desperation. I didn't come here to fight, Margaret said, her voice shaking. I came to make things clear. James, I gave you my years, my loyalty. And you threw me away like trash for a girl who doesn't even know what real love means. Keisha scoffed, stepping closer. You don't get it, do you? He doesn't want you. He never will. You're nothing but his past. I'm his future. James raised his hands. Enough, both of you. But neither listened. Suddenly, Margaret pulled a small kitchen knife from her purse. Gasps filled the air. She pointed it at Keisha, her hand trembling. Stay away from him. You'll regret it if you don't. But Keisha, hot-tempered and fearless, didn't back away. Instead, she lunged. The two women crashed against each other, screaming, clawing, and striking in a frenzy. James tried to pull them apart, but they were locked in a violent struggle. The knife flashed under the streetlight. Margaret swung, wildly, but in the chaos, Keisha managed to wrestle the blade from her. In one horrifying motion, Keisha turned the knife against the older woman. She stabbed Margaret in the chest. Again and again, each thrust fueled by rage and fear. Margaret gasped, her eyes wide, her body growing weak. She fell to the ground, clutching at her chest. Blood pooled beneath her, staining the dirt. James stood frozen, horrified. But before he could react, Keisha did something unthinkable, as if madness had taken her. Keisha crouched over Margaret's body and, with chilling brutality, ripped at the wound. By the time she stopped, Margaret's heart was torn from her chest. Silence fell over the park. James stumbled backward, his face pale with shock. Keisha, what have you done? He whispered. Keisha, breathing heavily, dropped the bloody knife. Her eyes were wide, her hands shaking. but a twisted smile curled at her lips. She asked for it. She wanted a fight, and she lost. James ran, terrified, leaving Keisha alone with the body. A neighbor, hearing the screams, had already called the police. Within minutes, sirens wailed, red and blue lights flashing through the night. When officers arrived, they found Margaret's lifeless body sprawled on the ground, her chest torn open. Keisha sat nearby, covered in blood, staring blankly into the distance. The crime scene was gruesome. Detectives described it as one of the most shocking murders they had ever witnessed. News of the nurse who traveled to Atlanta for love and lost her life spread quickly, shocking both Charlotte and Atlanta. Keisha was arrested on the spot, charged with first-degree murder. James, though not directly involved, became a central witness in the case. He was left haunted, knowing his selfishness had sparked a tragedy that ended with death. Margaret Davis's funeral was held a week later. Her coworkers, friends, and family wept for a woman who had spent her life saving others, but died brutally over a man who never deserved her love. In the end, the story was not about love at all. It was about pride, betrayal, and a battle no one truly won. For one heart beat its last in the dirt of an Atlanta park, while another heart, young, wild, and reckless, would spend the rest of its days locked behind prison walls.